Ever heard of Henry Ford? Of course you have. He's the guy who put America on wheels, right? Well, once you look behind the mask, you see a messed up person with a dark legacy that is as big as his hero journey. While Ford was busy changing the world with his cars, he was also spewing some of the most toxic, hateful things you can imagine. Now you might be thinking, so what? It's just some crazy old rich guy spouting nonsense. But Ford's hateful ideas spread like wildfire. His ideas became hit with the worst crowd imaginable, the Nazis. Ford's legacy raises some seriously heavy questions about how we view our heroes and what progress really means. Think about it. Can we separate the genius inventor from the hateful bigot? Should we? And how did Ford's ideas shape the world we live in today? But first, who was Henry Ford, really? It's 1863, and baby Henry's born on a farm in Michigan. While other kids are out playing catch, little Henry's already got his hands dirty, tinkering with the family's steam engine. Talk about a gearhead in the making. His dad, William, was all about the farm life and wanted Henry to follow in his muddy footsteps. But Henry? He had other plans. At 16, he just got tired of it and headed to the big city of Detroit to become an apprentice machinist. Risky move? You bet. But it paid off big time. Now, don't go thinking Ford was some bookworm. School wasn't really his thing, but that didn't stop him. He was more of a DIY kind of guy, staying up late reading about engines and building stuff. Fast forward to 1903, and boom, Ford Motor Company is born. Ford's got this crazy idea. What if cars weren't just for rich folks? What if everyone could have one? Enter the Model T in 1908. This wasn't just a car, it was a revolution on wheels. At $850, it was like the iPhone of its day. Suddenly, everyone had to have one. But Ford's real game changer, though, was the assembly line in 1913. This wasn't just a new way to build cars. It was like Ford looked at the whole world of manufacturing and said, "We're doing it my way now." Suddenly, workers could afford the cars they were making, and Ford was rolling in dough. Now Henry Ford has become the legend we all know. But this journey isn't all sunshine and rainbows. We're talking controversial views that'll make your jaw drop and actions that'll have you shaking your head. Yeah, the guy was a genius when it came to cars. But man, did he have some seriously messed up views. Racism and sphere of influence. Let me take you back to the early days. The year 1918 marked a dark turn when Ford acquired the Dearborn Independent, a local newspaper that would serve as a mouthpiece for his deeply ingrained anti-Semitic ideologies. In the following years, this publication became notorious for churning out a series of articles entitled The International Jew. These writings spewed venomous conspiracy theories, claiming that a vast Jewish conspiracy was orchestrating global control over finances and the media landscape. The repercussions of these incendiary articles were profound. Compiled into a book, they disseminated a toxic mix of hate and bigotry, intensifying the flames of anti-Semitism across America. Ford's narratives were not mere whispers in the dark. They resonated far and wide, so much so that they were translated into German, where they served as a malignant inspiration for Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. And as Hitler's venomous rhetoric poisoned the minds of Germans, he drew inspiration from an unexpected source across the Atlantic. Who was this American puppet master pulling the strings of hate? None other than Henry Ford, the automotive tycoon whose name once symbolized the American dream. Adolf Hitler, the embodiment of evil in the 20th century, didn't just admire Ford, he idolized him. In the pages of Mein Kampf, Hitler's twisted manifesto, Ford's name appears like a dark incantation. Ford's infamous Dearborn Independent spewed its toxic bile, not just in America, but in Nazi Germany too. These weren't just words on paper. They were matches tossed into a powder keg of hate. Can you imagine the weight of responsibility? Every translated article, every circulated pamphlet, became a bullet in Hitler's ideological arsenal. But the horror doesn't end there. In 1938, as the world teetered on the brink of war, Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, Nazi Germany's highest honor for a foreigner. Let that sink in. While millions trembled in fear of the growing Nazi menace, Ford was being celebrated by the architects of genocide. Ford's ideas weren't just passive influences. They were actively woven into the very fabric of Nazi propaganda. His conspiracy theories about Jewish control of finance and media became the pseudo-intellectual bedrock for unspeakable atrocities. Ford didn't just tarnish his legacy, he bloodstained it. The Dearborn Independent provided a ready-made framework for the Nazi Party's portrayal of Jews as a dangerous, subversive element in society. Ford's words echoed in Nazi speeches, reinforcing prejudices and giving a veneer of legitimacy to their murderous agenda. But here's the truly terrifying part. By presenting Ford as a respected American industrialist who shared their views, the Nazis created a sense of validation for their own twisted beliefs. It wasn't just propaganda. It was a stamp of approval from across the ocean, a nod from the land of the free that emboldened the architects of the final solution. His influence on Nazi ideology isn't a footnote. It's a scar on the face of history that we can never erase. But our journey into the heart of darkness isn't over yet. Let's rip the mask off Ford's management style and expose you to the iron fist that ruled his empire. Let me explain. Henry the Maniac Manager. Henry Ford wasn't just content with making cars. Nope, he wanted to play puppet master with his workers' lives too. Talk about a control freak. Ford had this crazy idea that he knew what was best for his employees, not just at work, but in their personal lives too. Can you believe it? It's like having your boss as a parent, but way, way worse. Get this. Ford actually created something called the sociological department. Sounds fancy, right? Wrong. These guys were basically the morality police. They'd show up at workers' homes, unannounced, to make sure everyone was living up to Ford's standards. We're talking cleanliness inspections, checking if you're sober, even making sure you're not spending too much money. It's like Big Brother, but with a mustache and a Model T. Imagine coming home after a long day of building cars, only to find your boss's lackeys rifling through your sock drawer to make sure it's tidy enough. Talk about a major invasion of privacy. That was supposed to be your time to relax, maybe with a beer in your hand. It's no wonder people started getting pretty ticked off. But wait, it gets even crazier. When workers decided they'd had enough of Ford's control freak antics and started organizing unions, Ford went full-on supervillain mode. Brace yourselves for a tale of tyranny, violence, and the ruthless suppression of workers' rights that will make your stomach churn. Picture this. It's 1932, the depths of the Great Depression. While millions are starving, a group of brave souls dare to demand a better life. Their crime? Organizing for fair wages and humane working conditions. Their punishment? A brutal beating that would make even the toughest gangster wince. Welcome to the Battle of the Overpass, a day that would forever stain the pages of labor history. Outside Ford's sprawling River Rouge complex, peaceful demonstrators were met, not with dialogue, but with fists and clubs. Ford's security forces, more akin to a private army than mere guards, descended upon the workers like wolves on lambs. The sickening crack of bones and the anguished cries of the injured echoed through the air. This wasn't just union busting, it was a declaration of war on the working class. But why? What drove the great Henry Ford to such barbaric extremes? The answer lies in the twisted labyrinth of Ford's mind. He saw himself not as an employer, but as a father figure to his workers, a benevolent dictator who knew what was best for his children. Unions, they were nothing but insolent brats, daring to question their father figure's authority. Ford's paternalistic delusions ran deep. He genuinely believed that he alone could provide for his workers' needs. Unions were not just a threat to his authority, they were an insult to his ego. In Ford's warped worldview, organized labor was a cancer that needed to be cut out, no matter how much blood was spilled in the process. The lengths to which Ford would go to maintain his iron grip on power were truly chilling. Violence was just the tip of the iceberg. Intimidation, espionage, and outright terrorism became tools of the trade. Workers lived in constant fear, never knowing if the person next to them on the assembly line was a fellow laborer or one of Ford's spies. But the consequences of Ford's war on workers weren't confined to the factory floor. Oh no, they rippled out across the entire landscape of American labor relations. Long after Ford's body was cold in the ground, the poison of his anti-union crusade continued to seep through the veins of the automotive industry. A legacy of mistrust and resentment festered like an open wound, infecting generations of workers and managers. The public, once enamored with Ford's rags-to-riches story, began to see the dark underbelly of his empire. Government officials, long content to let big business run amok, were forced to confront an uncomfortable question: how much power is too much? The very foundations of corporate America began to tremble as the nation grappled with the rights of workers in the face of unbridled capitalism. As we peel back the layers of Ford's complex legacy, we're confronted with a man whose influence extended far beyond the assembly line. He wasn't just shaping cars, he was molding the very fabric of American society. And sometimes, that fabric was stained with the blood of those who dared to stand up for their rights. But hold on to your seats, because our journey into the heart of Ford's empire is far from over. Henry Ford, not content with reshaping America, set his sights on conquering the very bowels of the earth itself. Welcome to Fordlandia, a fever dream of rubber trees and American values gone horrifically, catastrophically wrong. Let's talk about the details. Twisted projects. This is a tale of hubris, madness, and the ultimate humbling of an industrial titan. In the late 1920s, Ford's empire got hungry for rubber, the lifeblood of his automotive behemoth. But there's a problem. The rubber supply is controlled by faraway lands, a fact that gnaws at Ford's insatiable appetite for control. So what does our intrepid industrialist do? He decides to play God in the Amazon rainforest. In 1928, Ford made a move that would make even the most ruthless people raise an eyebrow. He bought a chunk of the Amazon larger than some US states. His vision? Not just a rubber plantation, but a slice of star-spangled paradise dropped into the green hell of Brazil. Fordlandia wasn't just about latex. It was Ford's twisted attempt to recreate America in the jungle. Can you imagine it? A utopian community rising from the mist-shrouded rainforest, where happy workers would live in picket-fenced houses, sipping lemonade on their porches after a hard day's work tapping rubber trees. Ford even imported that most quintessential of American pastimes, square dancing. Yes, you heard that right. Square dancing in the Amazon. This man lived in his own brain. But here's where our tale takes a dark turn. Ford's grand vision, like so many dreams in the jungle, quickly became a nightmare. The rubber trees, those green gold mines Ford was banking on, refused to play along. They withered and died, mocking Ford's attempts to bend nature to his will. A Frankenstein's monster of time clocks, prohibition, and square dances collided spectacularly with the rhythms of Amazonian life. The result? A powder keg of resentment that exploded into open rebellion. Workers, pushed to the brink, rose up against their American overlords in a scene more reminiscent of a jungle fever dream than a corporate utopia. And the environment? It howled its protest with every fallen tree, every failed crop. Ford's vision of an industrial paradise was not just impractical, it was an ecological nightmare. The delicate balance of the rainforest ecosystem, cultivated over millennia, was shattered by the relentless march of Ford's misguided progress. But here's the kicker, the twist that would make even the most hardened cynic's jaw drop. Henry Ford, the mastermind behind this colossal disaster, never once set foot in Fordlandia. Can you fathom it? The puppet master, pulling strings from his ivory tower in Dearborn, Michigan, while his grand experiment unraveled in the steaming jungles of Brazil. This absence wasn't just a footnote. It was the rot at the core of Fordlandia's failure. How could Ford's minions possibly convey the suffocating heat, the maddening drone of insects, the sheer alien nature of the Amazon, to a man who'd never left the comfort of his air-conditioned office? The disconnect between Ford's fever dream and the harsh reality on the ground was as vast and impenetrable as the rainforest itself. As Fordlandia spiraled into chaos, it became a grotesque parody of Ford's American dream. The neat rows of houses stood empty. The square dance hall echoed with the screech of jungle birds instead of fiddles. The rubber trees, those few that survived, stood as mocking monuments to Ford's folly. As Fordlandia crumbled, Ford's iron will metamorphosed into a dangerous delusion that would cost him dearly. A titan of industry, blinded by his own brilliance, hurling fistfuls of cash into the maw of a ravenous jungle. Ford, trapped in the quicksand of sunk cost bias, couldn't or wouldn't see the writing on the wall. It was as if admitting defeat would shatter the very foundation of his empire. But at what cost? By 1945, when the last disillusioned worker fled this green hell, Ford had hemorrhaged tens of millions of dollars. A king's ransom in those days. And what did he have to show for it? A few wilting rubber trees and a collection of decaying American-style bungalows slowly being reclaimed by the voracious rainforest. The final insult? The land, once heralded as the key to Ford's rubber independence, was unceremoniously dumped back into the lap of the Brazilian government for pennies on the dollar. But the true tragedy of Fordlandia lies not in its financial failure, but in its catastrophic human and environmental toll. Ford's management, those starched-collar missionaries of American industrialism, were woefully unprepared for the harsh realities of the Amazon. They might as well have tried to impose rush-hour traffic on a piranha-infested river. The legacy of Fordlandia serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and the hubris of those who wield it. What drives a man to such extremes? Was it pure greed, a god complex run amok, or something darker, more primal? A desperate need to prove that his way, the American way, could triumph over nature itself. Let's dissect it together. What's his motivations? Let's dive headfirst into the churning cauldron of Henry Ford's mind, a place where enthusiasm isn't just a feeling. It's a force of nature capable of reshaping the very fabric of reality. A man possessed, his eyes ablaze with an inner fire that could melt steel. That people was Henry Ford, a human dynamo whose enthusiasm crackled through the air, electrifying everyone in his orbit. For Ford, success wasn't just a goal, it was an obsession, a relentless drumbeat driving him forward with the intensity of a locomotive at full throttle. But make no mistake, this wasn't some fleeting burst of motivation. Oh no. Ford's enthusiasm was a carefully cultivated inferno, stoked by the coals of an unwavering vision. In his world, ideas weren't mere thoughts floating in the ether. They were blueprints for revolution, waiting to be forged in the white-hot furnace of his will. That's the energy Ford brought to every endeavor. It wasn't enough to have an idea. You had to have the sheer, unadulterated gall to see it through. In Ford's eyes, the dreamers who couldn't execute were little more than smoke, dissipating in the harsh light of reality. But here's where our tale takes a sharp, unsettling turn. Ford's vision of society was as controversial as it was crystal clear. In Ford's world, the notion of inherent equality wasn't just misguided, it was downright dangerous. He saw a world of stark contrasts, where ability wasn't distributed evenly, but clustered in pockets of brilliance. It's a worldview that would make modern sensibilities recoil, but Ford embraced it with the fervor of a true believer. Imagine, if you will, a society where your worth is measured not by your humanity, but by your utility. This was Ford's vision, a world where differences in ability weren't just recognized, but exalted as the very engine of progress. Ford believed that this inequality, this fundamental imbalance in human capability, was the secret sauce of societal advancement. In his mind, it was the outliers, the misfits, the square pegs who truly pushed humanity forward. These were people like Henry Ford, a man whose obsession with frugality bordered on the fanatical, and he did push our society in many ways. Picture, if you will, a world drowning in its own excess, a bloated, inefficient beast gorging itself on resources while the masses struggle to make ends meet. This was the industrial landscape that Ford surveyed with a mixture of disgust and determination. His verdict, a scathing indictment that would make even the most hardened CEO's blood run cold. Ford didn't just see waste. He saw a cancer eating away at the heart of society. Every scrap of material discarded, every inefficient process, was a personal affront to his vision of a lean, mean production machine. Ford's vision of work was nothing short of revolutionary. He saw labor not as a necessary evil, but as a natural state of being, as essential to human flourishing as breathing. In his mind, a life of leisure was a pale imitation of true living. It's a perspective that would make modern advocates of work-life balance recoil in horror, but Ford embraced it with fervor. But wait, there's more. Just when you think you've got a handle on Ford's philosophy, he throws another curveball that will leave your head spinning. In Ford's world, the ivory towers of academia and the hallowed halls of expertise were nothing more than prisons of the mind. He saw experts not as fonts of wisdom, but as purveyors of limitations, men and women so bound by what they knew to be impossible that they couldn't see the revolutionary potential right in front of their noses. Can you imagine it? A titan of industry, shaping the future not through careful analysis and expert opinion, but through sheer force of will and gut instinct. No wonder he made all those mistakes and also made amazing, revolutionizing changes. It's an approach that flies in the face of everything we're taught about decision-making, yet Ford wielded it with the precision of a master craftsman. The echoes of Ford's philosophy still reverberate through the halls of industry today. Look, I know we went through this genius's journey, but this isn't just a trip down memory lane. It's a descent into the very bowels of industrial hell, where the echoes of Ford's beliefs still reverberate with bone-chilling intensity. But how did we get here? Why is Henry Ford the man he was like? Control freak, ignorant, and downright savage. In the crucible of America's Industrial Revolution, one man's vision would forever alter the landscape of manufacturing and society itself. Henry Ford, a name that echoes through the annals of history, emerged from the chaos of early automotive entrepreneurship with a set of beliefs so radical, so transformative, that they would reshape the very fabric of American life. But what forged these ideologies? What tempering fires molded the mind of this industrial titan? The answer lies in the treacherous terrain of Ford's early career, a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of failed ventures and shattered dreams. Picture this. It's the late 1890s, and the fledgling automobile industry is a shark tank of cutthroat competition and financial peril. Ford, driven by an almost manic obsession with perfection, launches his first company, the Detroit Automobile Company. But this isn't a tale of instant success. No, this is where our story truly begins. In the ashes of failure, the Detroit Automobile Company crashes and burns, victim to Ford's relentless pursuit of the perfect design and a crippling lack of financial backing. But Ford, like a phoenix rising from the flames, isn't done. He tries again with the Henry Ford Company, only to be unceremoniously ousted by his own board of directors. Can you imagine the gut-wrenching betrayal, the searing pain of rejection? These weren't just setbacks. They were brutal, formative experiences that would etch themselves into Ford's psyche, shaping every decision he'd make from that moment on. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of breaking him, these failures ignite a revolutionary spark in Ford's mind. He realizes that the key to success isn't just about building a better car. It's about reimagining the entire system of production and consumption. And so, in 1903, with the backing of investors who see his visionary potential, Ford launches the Ford Motor Company. This time, he's not just building cars. He's constructing an entirely new paradigm of manufacturing. Enter the assembly line, Ford's masterstroke. In 1913, this innovation crashes into the world of manufacturing like a meteor, obliterating old methods and ushering in a new era of mass production. The Model T rolls off these lines at breakneck speed, transforming from a luxury item for the elite into a vehicle for the masses. But Ford's revolution doesn't stop there. Oh no, he's just getting started. In a move that sends shockwaves through the industrial world, Ford introduced the $5 workday in 1914. Double the average wage. Can you fathom the audacity, the sheer economic upheaval? But this wasn't mere generosity. It was calculated brilliance. Ford understood that well-paid workers weren't just more productive, they were potential customers. He was creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of production and consumption. But there's a dark undercurrent to this largesse. Ford's vision of worker welfare comes with strings attached. A paternalistic approach that seeks to mold not just the work habits, but the very lives of his employees. It's a chilling reminder that even visionaries can harbor controlling tendencies. These experiences, the bitter taste of failure, the exhilaration of innovation, the power to shape lives, they all coalesce into Ford's core ideology. He comes to believe that mass production isn't just a business strategy. It's a path to societal prosperity. His distrust of elites and established power structures, born from his early struggles, fuels a paradoxical vision of egalitarianism, one filtered through the lens of his own biases and beliefs. Ford's legacy is a Gordian knot of progress and control, innovation and prejudice. He democratized the automobile, yes, but at what cost? His assembly lines brought affordable cars to the masses, but also ushered in an era of mind-numbing repetition for workers. His high wages improved lives, but his paternalistic policies invaded privacy and autonomy. But I want to ask you now that you know everything. Was he a revolutionary or a supervillain? Let's know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.